Use your motion controls, Fox. Try aiming with your motion controls. Fox, try using the motion controls. Try aiming with the motion controls. Fox, you can hit your targets better with the motion controls. Try using your motion controls. Use your motion controls, Fox. Try using those motion controls, Fox. Have you tried your motion controls, Fox? Have you tried?
Good luck.
Star Fox Zero is the biggest disappointment I've experienced since Little Big Planet 3. I know what you all must be thinking, it's because of the controls, right? Every single review, discussion, or article I've seen only seems to be able to talk about the controls. Yes, the controls are problematic, and I'm going to be talking at length about them, but when that is the only thing that people focus on, they miss seeing the many other issues the game has. Even if the control issues in Star Fox Zero were fixed, the game would still be an uninspired, mediocre mess of a video game. In order to explain this, I'm going to be ditching my normal review formula and instead going in depth on the biggest issues I have with the game. It's not going to be a complete roast, there are some things that the game does incredibly well, but for the most part, it's a disappointing lackluster mess that's hindered by an unwieldy control scheme. The controls. Of course, we're going to have to start with the thing that everybody cares about the most. As much as I love to say this to the end so that people actually watch the whole video, I need to start by talking about the controls because it highlights the fundamental problem in the thought process behind this game's core design. Part 1. The thought process. So believe it or not, Star Fox Zero has actually been in development for much longer than you would think. The Star Fox was originally going to have an installment on the Wii, but that never happened. The game never got past the planning stages. In an interview done back in 2014, Shigeru Miyamoto said, "We originally began working with Star Fox back on Wii, and we had a small group of people experimenting with it for many years, maybe about 6 years, but we didn't find an idea that really brought that together for the Wii. So instead, we moved experimentation to the Wii U, using some of the same assets." In another interview the same year, he gave a little more information. "We worked on some ideas around Star Fox back during the Wii days, but the problem was that we didn't have any new ideas to bring to the game. I wasn't particularly interested in just making another Star Fox game with better graphics and better sound. So we set that aside back then. This time, as we were doing our experiments, and we found this idea of doing the two-screen gameplay." I think that these particular quotes really highlight the fundamental issues with the thought process behind Star Fox Zero, and even Nintendo as a whole. Miyamoto constantly says here that the team working on Star Fox wanted to create something new, that they wanted to figure out a new idea to bring to the series. Now this doesn't seem bad, it actually seems quite good, but when he says that he wasn't interested in making just another Star Fox game with better graphics and sound, it gives away what new ideas actually means. When Miyamoto says new ideas, he actually means gimmicks. He doesn't mean new ideas to refine the series, such as new game mechanics or tweaks to existing ones. He's talking about new ways to control the game. First of all, the statement, "I wasn't particularly interested in just making another Star Fox game," is completely baffling. It's not like Star Fox gets fairly similar installments on a regular basis like Mario or Zelda. Star Fox is a series that hasn't seen an installment for an entire console generation. Not only that, but every installment has been drastically different from each other. There haven't been 2 games in a row with the same kind of gameplay. The games are very experimental and they haven't quite nailed down an exact formula like Zelda or Mario have. So to say that you didn't want to create just another Star Fox game is completely moronic. Secondly, when I think about what Miyamoto means by new ideas, it's incredibly baffling to me that in the apparent 6 years of experimentation, nobody at Nintendo thought to try the split aiming idea on the console that had incredibly good pointer controls. Actually, somebody did think of this idea. It was Treasure, and the game was called Sin and Punishment Star Successor. Sin and Punishment's gameplay could have easily been an inspiration on what direction to take the Star Fox series if Miyamoto really wanted to play with the control. But I have a feeling that Miyamoto was thinking more along the lines of using the Wii remote like a joystick, using gyroscopic controls, rather than designing around the Wii's strengths. Even though this is just speculation, it wouldn't surprise me if it turned out to be true. Star Fox Zero isn't the first time Miyamoto experimented with gyro controls in the Star Fox game. Star Fox 64 3D had gyro controls, and they were absolutely abysmal. Not to mention, Miyamoto had already experimented with the pointer and swinging controls that the Wii had to offer with The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess and Super Mario Galaxy. So if those ideas were already used, he might consider them played out and not new enough. The point is that instead of focusing on building a Star Fox game that feels good to play, the focus went to making a Star Fox game that has neat controls. This flies in the face of how Miyamoto used to design games. In the days of the 64, Miyamoto would test the core mechanics of Super Mario 64 by chasing a rabbit in an empty field until those controls felt perfect. Nowadays, he puts fancy motion controls and gimmicks into games for no other reason than the console can do it. Sometimes this works out, but in order for it to do so, the controls have to work incredibly well and do something that a button or joystick simply cannot. In Splatoon, the gyro controls give precision aiming and feel incredibly natural. In Star Fox Guard, the touchscreen and TV separation frustration help to create the anxiety and tension that the tower defense needs to force players to pay attention and think fast. These types of controls can be beneficial to a game, but if you're putting them in just to put them in for the sake of having them, then you're going to create a frustrating experience that makes players wish they could just press a button instead. Star Fox Zero was originally supposed to be released on November 20th, 2015, but was pushed back to April 22nd, 2016. When this happened, Miyamoto made a statement saying, "While we have already reached the stage where it would be technically possible to release the title in time for the year-end holiday season, we want to polish the game a bit more so that players would be able to more smoothly grasp the new style of play that we are proposing." This basically confirms that the game was delayed due to the controls. This is probably done after all the negative press the game received once people got their hands on it at E3 2015. People were even asking if the motion controls could be turned off. This should have been a major warning sign to anyone on the development team that maybe they shouldn't have gone with such incredibly awkward controls. Of course, there really wasn't much they could do at this point. It's not like they would have the time to completely revamp the game's entire core idea, but they could have at least fixed the major issues that caused the control scheme to completely fall apart. Part 2. The controls themselves. Star Fox Zero's controls are terrible for very specific reasons. The most glaring issue that causes the most frustration is the inaccuracy of the aiming on the TV screen. Due to the fact that there are two perspectives going on at once, the targeting on the TV screen becomes incredibly inaccurate when shooting at anything not directly in front of the R-Wing. Star Fox Zero uses a shared crosshair, which is being displayed on both the gamepad and TV at once. When aiming in the first-person perspective, shots go exactly where you aim because you're seeing the crosshair from directly behind it. However, when viewing these shots from the third-person perspective, you'll notice that the crosshair isn't showing where the lasers will go, but rather the halfway point. It's a perspective issue that easily could have been solved if the game didn't share its crosshair between two viewpoints. The game could have displayed two different crosshairs that both accurately showed where the player would shoot, getting rid of any disconnect the shared crosshair system creates. The point of having two screens was to give a player precision aiming, and if there were two different crosshairs, a player could easily tilt the gamepad to adjust their aim and hit a target that they wanted to while still focusing on the TV screen. The gamepad's first-person view would still be useful because some enemies or weak points might be at an angle simply not visible on the TV screen, so a player would still switch between the two perspectives, but only when they needed to or wanted to. With the current system, the player is expected to switch between the two views constantly, creating frustration and disorientation, especially in all-range mode battles. During all-range mode, the problem is amplified when you lock onto an enemy with ZL because it completely removes the crosshair on the TV screen, forcing the player to switch views when they might not want to. The crosshair can help orient a player, so removing it is suddenly jarring and confusing. I understand this was implemented to force the player to use the second screen, but as a result, it makes the game feel horrible to play. It makes it feel like you are not in control. If both screens had their own independent crosshairs, the player would be able to decide when they wanted to use the other screen. This makes it feel like the player has much more control over the game and keeps their focus on the better view. Miyamoto would still have his gimmick, but the player would be able to decide when or if they wanted to use it. It may not seem like such a big deal, but this simple tweak of two separate accurate crosshairs could drastically improve the game. Another reason why the aiming in Star Fox Zero feels so bad is because it needs to be recalibrated all the time. I would just be sitting still, not moving at all, and my crosshair would slowly drift off to the left. Why is this? In a game like Splatoon, the controls only need to be recalibrated maybe 2 times around, once at the beginning and another when you respawn after being splatted, but they never got out of sync as much as the controls in Star Fox Zero do. The reason behind why is actually quite simple and shows a serious problem this dual screen mechanic presents. The reason why Zero's controls are always getting out of sync is because they are locked to the direction the R-Wing is facing. In Splatoon, the controls don't get out of sync often because they are locked to the camera and are not affected by the Inkling's position or direction at all. They can be moved independently regardless of how the Inkling moves. Nothing is moving the camera unless you purposely move it. In Star Fox Zero, the controls are heavily dependent on where the R-Wing is facing. At all times, the crosshair is being pulled to face the direction the R-Wing is facing. If you don't move the gamepad at all and focus on the TV screen, you can still fly around and shoot targets like you could in other Star Fox games. However, this presents a major problem the second the gamepad is moved. If you move the gamepad to aim at something, then resume flying like normal, the crosshair will be locked to the position you were aiming at, and now your controls are desynced. It's a much worse problem in all range mode, but it still happens in the on-rails segments. The biggest problem with this is that there is no clear way to fix it. If the aiming was not locked to the front of the ship, you would have to aim with the gyro controls constantly, and the bottom screen would be even more disorienting. The game has a second control option that locks the gyro controls to whenever you're not shooting, and this is a little better, but the issue still isn't fixed because this is a Star Fox game. You'll be shooting constantly. If the game had some kind of separate button to unlock the free aim, so to say, then maybe the system would work better. Your aiming would always snap back to the proper position during normal gameplay, and if you needed to aim with the gamepad, you would just hold down a button to unlock the crosshair. This way, the player is in control of when they are using the gyro controls, or when they are not. Some might say this is exactly how the second control scheme works, but because the same button that unlocks the aiming is also tied to the shooting, it still doesn't fix fix the issues because a player has to spam the shoot button in order to aim with the gyro controls. The key aspect of why these controls feel so bad is the range of the lasers. It's not really a problem with the controls themselves, but it adds to how terrible they feel. For some reason, the lasers in Star Fox Zero have horrible range. It's very noticeable in Sector Alpha, the second level of the game, with these massive targets that you can see your lasers hitting, but deal no damage. This is just inexcusable. If a player can see the laser hitting a target, but the game simply says it doesn't count, that makes the controls feel broken and cheap. This is one of those simple solutions where the fix for this was to not have the range be so unbelievably limited. It's so bad, sometimes you can't even hit targets in all range mode arenas. So combine together the inaccurate crosshair, the gyro controls that are always out of sync, and the lasers that don't hit what they're physically touching, and you have controls that feel absolutely abysmal. And I'm not even done, that's just the motion controls. There are many more problems with the physical buttons as well. First of all, the idea to put all the movement abilities onto the right analog stick is problematic. I actually like it to an extent, but the game ruins it by putting too many mechanics onto one device. Pushing forward on the right stick boosts you, and pulling back on it brakes, while tilting it left and right tilts the R-wing for tighter turning. I actually like this a lot, because the Wii U's analog sticks are right next to each other, and it feels natural to just push in the directions you want to go. It does result in leaning a lot more than you might want to, but it doesn't hinder your performance. It feels good, and I actually like it quite a lot. But the problems come from all the other functions that the stick also does. If you decide to boost, you will do so until you run out of energy. However, the energy won't begin to replenish until you let go of the stick. In Star Fox 64 and Star Fox Assault, the energy would recharge as soon as it was depleted, but it wouldn't allow you to use it again until it refilled. Even though Zero made a good choice by including 2 energy gauges instead of 1, they mess it up by changing how they recharge. Even if you're completely new to the series, it adds another aspect that you have to be thinking about and clutters up an already unnatural feeling control scheme. You might not even notice that the energy isn't recharging, and if you do, you might not know why. This creates unneeded confusion and frustration. In order to do a barrel roll, you have to hit the stick left or right twice in rapid succession. This makes absolutely no sense, and it's incredibly uncomfortable to do. The only barrel roll you'll do is to the right because doing it to the left is unbelievably uncomfortable. This physically hurts to do. If you want to do a somersault or a U-turn, you have to flick the sticks simultaneously in specific directions. But you won't ever want to do that because you can just push the X or B buttons to instantly perform the move much easier. So why in the world does it need to be mapped to the sticks when the easier, better way to perform the move is a single button press? The only thing that this does is cause you to accidentally flip around when you didn't want to, and it happens all the time. If you decide to use the sticks, the maneuver is performed much faster, but it feels clunky and confusing. It's much easier to just push a button. And that's not even the end of what the right stick does. If you click it down, it fires a bomb. Why? The R button may be out of the way, but it makes sure a player never accidentally fires a bomb. Clicking down on the right stick is just an unnecessary second way to fire them. The only button that does what you expect it to is ZR, which fires the laser and feels comfortable and natural. But the entire left side of the controller is wasted. The ZL button is for locking onto things, but the L button and D-pad are not used at all. There aren't even any digital buttons put onto the Wii U's touchscreen that could have easily freed up some space. While I'm talking about controls, I need to talk about the lock-on system and how it is a complete mess. Because of Star Fox Zero's new 2-screen perspective, Miyamoto and his team had to come up with some way of helping the player not become disoriented, while also finding a way to use the split-screen aiming at the same time. The team's solution to this was to implement a Zelda-like lock-on system that would show you where enemy targets are in relation to the R-wing, so the player could easily adjust their aim and flight patterns in order to intercept. This seems like a great idea on paper, but in practice it fails miserably for a few major reasons. The first is that the camera changes jarringly fast. The camera doesn't ease into the view or give time to the player to orient themselves, but rather zooms into position as fast as possible, causing a lot of confusion. In dogfights, the targets you locked onto are zooming around as much as you are, so the camera will be constantly changing, causing the player to fight the camera in order to fly in the correct direction and try to take a few shots with the motion controls. You can't even use the TV screen to aim anymore on an R-wing because, as I mentioned before, the targeting crosshair disappears while locking on, forcing you to use the gamepad, which means you're not looking where you're going and you can't see enemies or obstacles around you. The worst part about the lock-on system is that more times than not, it's mandatory and the game locks on automatically for you. This is incredibly disorienting and doesn't help the player in any way. It feels like this was meant to create cool-looking cutscenes and videos for spectators rather than the player who is focusing on the gamepad. This is enforced by the fact that if you fly too close to a locked-on enemy ship in a dogfight, the game will go to slow motion and show an epic shot of a near-miss collision. This is cool and feels awesome, but it enforces the idea that this lock-on system was built for spectacle and not practicality. The lock-on system just takes the skill out of piloting an R-wing. If you can just aim wherever you want, it removes the challenge and intensity of a dogfight. In games like 64 and Assault, a dogfight was intense because you were equals, weaving around each other, trying to line up the perfect shot, and feeling triumphant when you eventually took down your opponent. But in Zero, you can just free aim aim and spam your lasers until you win. It's even worse in walker mode. If you're in a dogfight, you can just transform into the walker, lock onto your opponent, and spam the dodge while constantly shooting, and you'll eventually win. No skill is required at all. I can understand why the lock-on system was implemented to encourage the use of the gyroscopic aiming, but it isn't polished enough to feel good or satisfying to use. It will often lock onto targets you didn't want to, and therefore disorients you even more. Adding to the disorientation, for some reason Star Fox Zero does not feature a map in all range mode. First of all, I find it incredibly unbelievable that a spaceship wouldn't have some form of radar. Second, the exclusion of a map makes no sense. Including one would have been a great way to keep track of a player's position and would have helped prevent confusion. I really have no idea why a map wasn't included. There would be no downside to doing so. Without one, all range mode battles can have additional frustration from the lack of clear boundaries, causing a player to suddenly be flipped around when they least expected it. In previous Star Fox games, using the map to its fullest was the best way to win a dogfight and plan accordingly, but now this feature is completely removed. So, what's the solution? How can Nintendo fix this? Star Fox Zero has been designed from the ground up to work with motion controls, so to simply remove them or turn them off would mean the game would fall apart harder than it already does. The game simply doesn't work well in its current form. The controls are not tight nor responsive, and the mechanics tied into the controls are not polished enough to help fix that lack of responsiveness. They could patch the game to change the crosshairs, increase the range of the lasers, include a crosshair during lock-on, or add a separate mode of play that allows the player to unlock the aiming when they want to, but it still wouldn't fix the issues with the button mapping and the many other problems the game has. Miyamoto and his team should have immediately realized that this was never going to work and moved on to something that functioned well, not something that made the Wii U look fancy, especially not this late in the console's life cycle, and especially not after announcing its death with the release of Zelda in 2017, literally days after the game was released. The thought process behind this game's conception was flawed and was never focused on gameplay that felt responsive or tight. It was all about what neat tricks Miyamoto could do with the gamepad, and it shows. Some people would say that these controls are fine, and that you just need to get used to them, but that simply isn't true. Getting used to them or getting good at them doesn't change the fact that they are bad controls with fundamental flaws. Your skill at Star Fox Zero doesn't make the game suddenly good, it just means you're good at a bad game. So now that we got the motion controls out of the way, we can move on to the many other problems that Star Fox Zero has. The story. When Star Fox Zero was announced, the same phrase was repeated over and over. Star Fox Zero was not a prequel, nor a sequel, nor a reboot, but a reimagining of Star Fox 64, which basically means it's a reboot, but whatever. When this was announced, many fans of the series became confused. What did this mean for the current canon? Was the series going to restart back at square one again? Or was this going to be some kind of what-if story? Miyamoto made it very clear in many interviews that the new teleporters would play a key role in the story. After hearing this information, many people theorized that the new story could be an alternate dimension plot. If it was, it could possibly even feature characters from all the Star Fox universes, creating something truly unique. People grew excited thinking about all the interesting possibilities that a reboot with dimensional portals could possibly explore. What made people even more interested and excited was Miyamoto talking about what he wanted to explore with the new plot.
You know, there's always been a few kind of themes to the story that have been really important for me, and one is the question of, well, why is Fox fighting? And then, of course, the question of, you know, I've always had this kind of interest in the, you know, adults who sort of raise their children to follow in their footsteps. And that's why in the storyline, for me, it's very important, those relationships between Fox and General Pepper and Andros. So this time with the story, we're still, you know, it's still focused in on sort of the relationship between them, but we've also, from a story side, introduced a number of new elements to it. And so you'll see these things will appear in the game called teleporters, and those play an important role in the story. So yeah, it hasn't really changed a whole lot this time, but you know, there's still that element of the father-son relationship. One thing that I have focused more on, and we've paid more attention to in the game this time, is the question of, is Andros really just simply an evil person or not? Or, you know, is General Pepper truly, you know, absolutely good? And also we look to explore a little bit more deeply the relationship between, you know, Fox's dad and General Pepper. The story is going to develop, I think, a lot more. It'll still be easy to follow, but it will look at some of more of these themes. But of course, on Wolf's team, you have, you know, Pigma, who betrayed Fox's dad, and you have Andros's nephew also, and so there are some relationships on that side as well. So I want people to know that this is a real hardcore action game, and it has a great story. It has these amazing scenes that play out, and so that's really what Star Fox Zero is all about.
Sounds interesting, right? Well, unfortunately, it's all
bullshit!
Listening back to these interviews has me completely baffled. All of these complex and interesting ideas are never present in the game, and they are not explored at all. The Star Fox Zero anime short even lies about the potential for story, because nothing like this happens in the actual game. The entirety of the new complex plot that was added to Star Fox Zero comes in the very last mission in the form of a massive plot dump that doesn't even happen during gameplay. And what comes from the shocking revelation?
We originally developed this teleportation device with Andros to bring peace to the galaxy. But he grew mad with power and claimed the technology for his own twisted purposes. When we discovered the truth, we decided to teleport Andros to another dimension, and it worked. We could never have done it without your father, Fox. But now Andros is back, and he's brought some new toys with him. He's even gained control of our teleporters. If this continues, the entire Lilat system will be in his clutches. We must do whatever it takes to stop Andros and destroy this technology. We need you, Fox. Will you help us?
Count on it. Andros won't get away with this.
So you're telling me that the main villain of Star Fox this entire time was actually the main villain of Star Fox? I don't know what to say about that. That's pretty good. It's 10 out of 10 rating right there. Prank can't go wrong. Perfect view. That's pretty good.
Miyamoto straight up lied to us here. There's absolutely nothing new and nothing interesting about the plot in Star Fox Zero. If your story needs to be told to the player all at once in a plot dump at the end of the game, then maybe you should realize you're doing something wrong. The game is literally the exact same plot of 64, done poorly, with the portals shoved in as an excuse to have hidden levels and pathways. The portals add absolutely nothing to the story whatsoever except as a MacGuffin to get Andros banished. The Star Fox team doesn't even use them in any interesting ways. They don't hop dimensions, they don't travel to unknown planets, and they don't even see any new characters or anyone from any other Star Fox games. The portals are only used as a means to go from one point to another. Miyamoto said he wanted us to question whether or not Andros was really evil or if General Pepper was entirely good. But there is no moment in the game whatsoever where anything like this occurs. If the story was told more like how the anime hinted it would be, then it could be interesting, but instead there's absolutely nothing. Why a reboot? Miyamoto made it seem like we'd be getting a more interesting and fleshed out version of 64's plot, but instead we got even less than what 64 had. So this brings up a question. Why was a reboot even necessary? I'm not opposed to the idea of a reboot with the Star Fox series, as long as it takes all the lessons it learned from previous games and applies them from the start. You could clean up a lot of the plot holes the series has, or introduce elements that could be used in future games, like characters or planets, right from the beginning. You could do so much with a reboot. You could even have the story start as James McCloud, so you have to play out the portrayal of Pigma and feel the drama for yourself. But of course, none of this is done at all. The new universe has less planets, less interesting locations, and much less plot. The potential a Star Fox reboot had was completely squandered. So why did Miyamoto reboot the series if he wasn't going to do anything new with it?
But we still wanted to retain the 4-member Star Fox team, and you still have Andros, and you have Fox's father, and sort of the relationships between all of them. And so we wanted to retain all of that, which is why we felt that, okay, let's kind of reimagine that game and that world in a new way with this new style of play. But what we found as we were taking that approach in development was that the Star Fox fans from long ago really wanted something more than that. And we also felt, that we wanted to really make sure that we brought out sort of all of what makes Star Fox what it is, outside of just the dogfighting style of gameplay, but also in the level design and things like that.
Doing something new with Star Fox Zero was never the plan. The only reason Zero is a reboot is to appeal to fans of Star Fox 64. Not to appeal to Star Fox fans in general, just fans of 64. See, believe it or not, these are actually two different things. The Star Fox fandom is incredibly weird and is split drastically between two types of fans. There are Star Fox fans, and then there are fans of Star Fox 64. The Star Fox fans might not like every game, but they do like the franchise as a whole. Heck, their favorite game in the series could even be Star Fox 64, but it's not the only game they like. Star Fox fans appreciate and enjoy the series as a whole, and they want to see it progress and move on, expanding upon the interesting and wonderful universe that the games have created. However, Star Fox 64 fans are fans of just that one game and insist that every Star Fox game that comes out must be exactly like it. They don't really care much for the story, they're more focused on the gameplay aspect of 64. They enjoy the mechanics in 64 so much that they want the ideas to be expanded upon and used. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the issue comes from the fact that these people are incredibly loud and vocal, shutting down any Star Fox game that doesn't meet their requirements for being like 64. These people usually say things like, what a Star Fox game really is, or what a Star Fox game should be, when what they really mean is that they just want a game like 64 again. Now, these fans are not doing anything wrong, they just want to see the cool mechanics from 64 fleshed out and used in a modern game. But the way they say that is problematic. They will often say, make it like 64, instead of what they mean, which is use the same mechanics as 64. So, as a result, we get Star Fox Zero, a game meant to appease this by being like 64, without understanding exactly what that actually means. Star Fox Zero is a reboot so that it can use imagery, sounds, quotes, enemy designs, music, and much more from 64. It tries incredibly hard to appeal to nostalgia, and it looks as much like 64 as possible so that people will like it. However, it completely misses why people like 64 and it falls flat as a result. If Miyamoto and his team created a game that continued the story of Star Fox but had the same gameplay mechanics as 64, it would have been a great success with both sides of the fanbase. That was all they needed to do, but instead they rebooted the series for the second time and banked on nostalgia. The game isn't exactly the same as 64, not by a long shot, but the intent to sell itself as a true successor to 64 is very apparent and easy to see. Not even a team. One of the biggest strengths of the Star Fox series is the radio chatter. It's a genius way to help communicate with your team constantly without having the gameplay interrupted. It's a great tool that helps develop characters' personalities, and it reinforces the strong team dynamic that the Star Fox series has. In other Star Fox games, mainly 64 and Assault, the radio chatter was used to great effect. As you spend more time with these characters, you know more about them and grow to like them. Star Fox Zero, on the other hand, completely messes this up and as a result has the most unlikable, boring, and uninteresting Star Fox team yet. The biggest reason for this is that the game gives us no reason to care about our team at all. Not only does their health not matter, as they are healed at the end of every mission, but they are barely present in the game at all. Exactly half of the missions in Star Fox Zero are solo missions, where the full team isn't present at all. This is a map with all the levels in Star Fox Zero. I'm going to cross out any of the levels that do not feature the entire Star Fox team in any way, including radio chatter. Now I'm going to circle the levels that do feature the entire team, also including radio chatter. As you can see here, exactly half of the levels in the game do not feature the entire team. For comparison, here are the same rules I just did, but applied to Star Fox 64. How in the world are we supposed to get attached to these characters or care about them at all when they're barely in the game? How can they be developed if we never get to spend time with them? Now, some might say they don't see a problem with this. These characters are super iconic. We already know them. Unfortunately, that simply isn't true here. You must understand that this is a reboot, a clean slate, and essentially these are all new characters. They cannot be riding on our previous understandings of who they used to be because they aren't the same characters. These new characters have to hold up on their own. They cannot rely on the fact that they look like, sound like, and are named after characters we like. They have to be developed independently, but Star Fox Zero simply does not give them the chance to be their own characters. It doesn't help that they're constantly reusing lines from 64, often in the wrong context, with stilted, awkward, and delayed delivery. The writing in this game is horrible, and often the only lines the team will shout at you are tutorials, rehash 64 quotes, boring lookout lines, or yell at you for shooting them when they fly in the way of your shots. Nothing develops the story or plot or gives insight to how the characters are feeling about the situation. Miyamoto said time and time again that he wanted to expand upon the relationships between characters in Star Fox Zero, but the characters never talk to each other, so how can that be possible? The absolute worst offender of this is during Zonus, when Fox is rescuing Kat from being trapped inside an enemy base. During the entire mission, Fox doesn't say a single word to Kat, and neither does Falco. Falco doesn't even show concern that Kat is trapped in an enemy base. When Kat shows up again during the next mission, Fox has no idea who Kat is despite just rescuing her. Falco acts like he's surprised to see her, and Kat doesn't know who Fox is despite her connections with Falco, and the fact that the original Star Fox team is the reason why the Lilac Wars began in this new universe. The writing in this game is consistently terrible and adds nothing to the experience. But at least they didn't go overboard and ruin characters by exploiting memes or anything. Map exploration. The coolest part of Star Fox 64 was the map exploration. The ability to find secret paths that would lead you to more difficult levels and 1 to 3 alternate ending bosses was awesome and has been replicated in many games to this day. It is the core mechanic that made Star Fox Zero so replayable and interesting. Star Fox Zero, despite trying to be like 64, screws up this mechanic tremendously. In Star Fox 64, you had the ability to find alternate paths from the very first time you put your cart into the N64. There were no hints to get the mission accomplished rating. You had to figure it out yourself, and as a result, felt fantastic when you finally discovered the correct thing to do. It had weight and importance to it due to the limited retries, the lack of backtracking, and the health of your teammates. If you screwed up, you had to start all over again. Or you could stick with your mistakes and see where you ended up. This was a brilliant mechanic, and I have no idea how Nintendo messed it up so badly in Star Fox Zero. When you start playing Zero, your abilities are locked away for no reason. You cannot use your walker from the start, and you cannot transform into the Landmaster right away. You have to play through the game the way it wants you to before you can go back and try for the alternate path, which is usually obvious and completely simple to find due to the game announcing your new abilities and updates on the map screen. The most baffling and idiotic decision Miyamoto and his team made was giving the player the ability to select any mission at any time on the map screen. All of the tension is thrown out the window and you can just go back to a previous mission and play it again and again until you get the mission accomplished rating. It doesn't feel like you actually accomplished anything. There's no worry about your teammates because not only are they absent for most of the missions, but their health is fully restored every time you visit the map screen, meaning they are hardly ever in any actual danger. Even if you accidentally shoot them, it doesn't do any damage. They still yell at you and interrupt the dialogue though. Not to mention there is only one final boss in Star Fox Zero with one ending. There are no secret endings or bosses, no interesting climaxes that reward you for doing a perfect playthrough, just the same ending boss fight every time. Something that is super disappointing is that the branching paths sometimes lead you to planets you've already been to, just with alternate levels. In 64, it was exciting to go to a completely new planet and see what it had in store, but this new Lilat system is so boring and lifeless due to the fact that you revisit the same planets over and over. It utterly baffles me that literally everything that made the exploration of 64 fun was completely ruined in Star Fox Zero. It's like they didn't even play their own game when developing this. I have absolutely no idea how Miyamoto could screw this up. It even messes up the story because the progression of levels makes absolutely no sense. In 64, it was very clear that each playthrough was a new adventure and that this was the first time the team was going to fight Andross. However, in Zero, it's incredibly confusing as to what's going on. To give an example, let's say you just started a new playthrough and you just beat Corneria by going through a secret portal in the alternate path. The story makes it clear that this is the first time Corneria is calling Star Fox for help. This is the very beginning, the first level. Yet, when Fox flies through the portal, he encounters a boss who acts like he's going to get revenge for all the other times Fox has beaten him. This makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. This is never explained because the portals are never explained. In this playthrough, Fox has never fought this enemy. This is their first encounter, so to say that he's going to beat him this time makes absolutely no sense and completely shatters your immersion in the story. The lack of thought here is astounding. The visuals. Now, some of you may remember this, but before Star Fox Zero came out, there were lots of complaints about the game's visuals. Many people said that the graphics looked horrible, and others thought that it looked fantastic. However, once the game came out, the debate was quickly snuffed out by the motion controls debate. In my opinion, Star Fox Zero has good graphics, but absolutely abysmal art direction. The game does technically look very pretty, but in terms of artistic direction, it's one of the worst I've ever seen. There's no consistent art style in Star Fox Zero. It has many that never meld together in a coherent way. It uses designs from Star Fox 64 and even the SNES Star Fox game, while also using new designs created for Zero. This creates an unbelievable clash of styles that never blends together. The absolute worst offender of horrible art direction is the environments. The cities never feel like cities, but instead random building blocks that have been thrown around on the floor. In Star Fox Assault, Corneria felt like an actual city. There were roads with stoplights that connected to all the buildings. There were billboards that displayed the news of all the asteroid attacks. There were details in the buildings themselves to make them feel like they actually had windows, doors, and an actual purpose. There were trees and foliage properly placed around the city in little areas. And even though it was small, effort was made to make Corneria feel like a real place. But in Star Fox Zero, there's none of that at all. The city doesn't even feel like a city because the buildings are way too far apart. The roads make no sense. There are no panicked civilians or soldiers trying to defend the place. If you look at the backgrounds, they didn't even bother to make bridges connecting to different islands. And the massive planets and moons in the sky of Corneria make absolutely no sense whatsoever when you realize nothing is that close to Corneria on the world map. This screams of laziness and feels horribly rushed. It never feels like you're flying through a city under attack because it is also generic and poorly thought out. If you thought Corneria was bad, the space colony is even worse. Literally just some towers in the middle of a massive sheet of metal texture. No roads, no billboards, no windows, and massive stretches of wasted space. It doesn't feel real, and there is no way to get immersed or care about it when it feels so lifeless. There are other effects and designs that absolutely fail to look interesting, no matter how pretty they are rendered. The biggest offender is easily the smart bombs. I don't even have to say much here. This is what they look like in 64, this is what they look like in Adventures, this is what they look like in Assault, this is what they look like in Command, This is how they look in Smash Bros, and this is how they look in Zero. You can easily see how incredibly lame they are. All they had to do was replicate the Smash Bros effect. This just highlights how lifeless the whole game's art style is. It feels rushed, unimaginative, and poorly thought out. Yes, it is rendered very nicely, and it does technically look very pretty, but artistically, it's lacking tremendously. Music and sound. The Star Fox series has always had unbelievably good music, but Star Fox Zero easily has one of the most forgettable soundtracks in the entire series. There are two halves to this soundtrack, the new songs and the remixed older songs. The new songs are unbelievably boring and unmemorable. The worst one is easily Star Fox Zero's main theme. Really kills it is the lack of pulse and identity. The Star Fox theme has always been one of my favorites, and the reason it's so kick-ass is that it has a distinct and driving beat to it. The theme was a march, highlighting the military efficiency that the team had, making it feel epic, giving weight to these characters and the adventure you were about to partake in. It sticks in your head, and you can't help but mentally picture Star Fox imagery when you hear it. It's perfect, and to be completely fair, Zero even has a great version of it, but it's not the main theme. I'm not opposed to new things, but Star Fox Zero's main theme is just terrible. It sounds horribly generic and doesn't even have a pulse to it like the 64 March did. The song puts more emphasis on horns, and that isn't a bad thing at all, but the notes just slide together. They all just mush into one another with no clear beginning or end, and it has a slower feeling to it. It doesn't feel as epic. The notes in the 64 theme were played with staccato, or a sharp distinction between each note, and as a result it felt more epic and defined. This new theme just slides all over the place, and it doesn't demand your attention like the other one does. It doesn't help that this theme is generic as can be, and doesn't make you think Star Fox when you hear it. I can put this song over many other games, and it fits just as well as it would in Star Fox. The new songs are a very mixed bag and usually all suffer from this lack of identity. They don't sound unique, and if you heard them used in other games, you wouldn't even realize that they're not supposed to be there. All the songs are miserable, some of them are actually quite good. They just don't have this distinct identity that the other Star Fox tracks had. It becomes even more jarring when there are remix versions of older Star Fox songs thrown into the same soundtrack, which stick out like sore thumbs. The remix songs have stronger melodies as opposed to the new tracks, and as a result they're more recognizable and memorable. The remixes are all pretty much okay, with the exception of one completely botched track. One of my favorite Star Fox tracks of all time is Boss B from Star Fox 64. The remix of this track in Zero is an absolute mess that completely missed why the original song was so epic. The song starts strongly, but as soon as it actually kicks into gear, falls apart miserably. First of all, the song's tempo is horribly slow compared to the original. helping with the incredibly sluggish pace is the unbelievable lack of drums. The only drum in the song is a snare just casually piddling along in the background, while in the original, the snare is going insane and the cymbal crashes help keep the tempo upbeat. The Zero version of the song also has the same issue I have with Zero's intro, where all the notes just mush together. This is a boss theme. In order to make it feel epic and fast-paced, you need to keep the beat clear and constant. You do this by having syncopation in your notes, but the Zero version just slogs along and as a result is the worst track on this soundtrack by far. This is the second time Nintendo has failed to remix this song in a good way, and it's absolutely baffling to me because it should be a slam dunk. Overall, the soundtrack in Star Fox Zero is very poorly handled, and not just in the composition field. The soundtrack's biggest detractor is the sound design of the game in general and how it is mixed. Even if you like the soundtrack, which is perfectly fine, you won't be able to hear it or enjoy it due to the horrible gimmicky sound design implemented in Star Fox Zero. All of the voices, laser sounds, chip effects, and more come through the gamepad, while the music, explosions, and environmental sounds come through the TV speakers. This is a huge problem. There is no option to turn the audio over to the TV. Once again, you are forced to use something even if you do not want to. In order to actually hear the performances, you have to turn your gamepad volume all the way up. As a result, you'll have the louder sounds blasting right at your face from your hands. This will always be much louder than your TV volume unless you crank that up to an insane degree. Basically, what this does is that it prevents the developers from having full control over the audio mixing, and as a result causes the music to be drowned out by the gamepad's noises. It's just horrible, and one of the reasons why Star Fox Zero's soundtrack is so forgettable, because you can never hear it. There are other examples of bad audio all over the game. The radio chatter has these incredibly awkward, huge pauses between characters that make the dialogue feel artificial. These spaces make the already forced acting feel even more awkward. I also think that using the original voice actors was a bad idea. They sound terrible. They're all much older now. It's been 19 years since 64, so they're all desperately trying to replicate how they sounded all those years ago. As a result, the lines feel forced and once again unnatural. Some voices sound okay, but for the most part they just don't fit anymore. Slippy sounds way too much like a girl, Fox never sounds natural in his delivery, and Peppy just sounds horrible. The end. Honestly, there are so many more problems with Star Fox Zero, but this video is already incredibly long. Zero does do some good things, like the slow motion near misses, flying through enemy shields as it shoots lasers, and the super fast speedrunning level at the end of the game, but it is not enough to save it from being horribly disappointing and mediocre. Even if Nintendo fixed the control issues with a patch, or never had them at all, the game still wouldn't be anything special. Star Fox Zero adds nothing to the series. It doesn't even provide a better jumping off point for sequels. Zero ends the exact same way 64 did, but with one exception. The Andross you defeat in Zero is always robotic, meaning that any sequels in this universe will probably have Andross as the main villain because Miyamoto doesn't like to do anything different with his IPs. I honestly have no interest in this series anymore if the next game is going to be in the Zero universe. Star Fox was a series I was invested in because not only do I love the gameplay, but I also love the characters and the world attached to it. I wanted to see what ending to Command was canon, if Command was canon at all. But now, we might never get that answer, and none of the interesting ideas from the past universe exist anymore thanks to this new bland reboot. All Nintendo had to do was make a game that continues the story and has 64's gameplay, and everybody would have been happy. Instead, Miyamoto insisted that we use a new gimmick on a dying, abandoned console. Many people like Star Fox Zero right now, but I feel like it will not withstand the test of time. When Skyward Sword first came out, everyone praised it, saying it was amazing and shooting down any negative opinions viciously. But over time, people eventually realized just how flawed the game was, that maybe it wasn't as good as they hyped it up to be. I feel like a similar thing will happen with Star Fox Zero. Right now, people are just too excited to finally get a Star Fox game again, let alone one with similar mechanics to 64. But once that excitement dies down, I honestly think that people will slowly realize that Zero is incredibly flawed and wasn't as good as they were saying it was. Does this mean that if you're having fun with Zero, you're somehow wrong? No, of course not. That would be stupid of me to say that you can't have fun with the game because I thought it was a bad game. I am just saying that Nintendo can do much better than this, and that Zero has some big problems that really shouldn't be ignored. It's got horrible controls, abysmal story, and worst of all, it adds nothing to the Star Fox series. Star Fox Zero is not worth your time, and frankly, I hope that the next Star Fox game is in the older universe, so that we can forget that Zero ever happened. Finally, after 6 revisions to the script, I am finally done talking about this freaking game. And I'm ready to move on to other reviews because that was painful. That was not fun to work on. I love Star Fox. I absolutely adore Star Fox. I have all this Star Fox crap. I love it. Star Fox is my favorite Nintendo IP next to The Legend of Zelda, and I was so ready to like this game. I was so excited for it. But in the end, it just wasn't. It just wasn't. It wasn't. I honestly could keep going. I could talk about how the James McCloud is used horribly. I could talk about how all the boss fights are boring because they're all in all range mode and they're all super slow and there's no like on rails bosses. I could go on and on about how much I don't like this game. In the end, Star Fox Zero is just something I don't think anybody should play. It's not worth your time. It doesn't add anything to the series. It's not even a good starting point because I'm pretty sure you can get 64 on the Virtual Console and it's great on there. So, like, just get that if you want to get into Star Fox. Or get Star Fox 64 3D. There's really no reason to get this. There's absolutely no reason for it. And it sucks because I don't like saying this because it's like Nintendo has this thing where if a game doesn't perform well, they usually take that as meaning that people don't like the series. Like when Metroid Other M bombed and everybody hated Metroid Other M because it was a bad Metroid game. And for many other reasons, but the core reason was it was a bad Metroid game. Nintendo took that to mean that we just didn't like Metroid games, which is not true at all. I have a feeling that that's going to happen to Star Fox, where Nintendo's going to say, oh, people just don't like Star Fox, so we just won't make Star Fox. And that's really upsetting, because I want to see the series move on, and I hate seeing it dormant for so long and just not have anything happen to it, because we got one just not great game. And for those wondering what I think of Star Fox Guard, it's good. Yeah, it's good. It's not amazing. It's good. Would I recommend buying Star Fox Zero just so you can get the physical copy of this? Absolutely not. It's $15 on the eShop. There's no reason to get the physical copy of this game, but it's good. That's pretty much all I can say about it. Well, that's it. I really don't know how to end this video. I don't have much more to say. I'm just disappointed. I'm disappointed.